following video is not affiliated with any support groups, religions, treatment centers, or institutions. This is an editorial and is not medical advice. Enjoy. Okay, here we go. 1 minute. Addiction, recovery. The topic is support groups. Let's start the timer now. So first of all, what I want to say about support groups is I'm not affiliated with any support groups. I say that at the beginning of every one of my videos. Now, the reason why I do that is there are many different types of support groups. So the first thing I want to say about a support group is a support group should essentially be free, in my opinion. It should possibly maybe have a donation basis. That's okay. Small donations to keep things moving in the support group, to have a space for the support group. But I don't believe that particular support groups that work on a daily basis for an individual should be paid for, and they should be available to anyone, really. And I have taken almost an entire minute to make that freaking point. So I've got a lot to clean up after this is over and the minute's over. So big fail today again. All right, now it's time for me to grade and evaluate what I just said. And boy, oh boy, did I ever think that I was going to have a lot more succinct knowledge about support groups, being in active addiction for as long as I was and being in recovery for 10 years. Gosh, man, but that's not the case. I really flubbed on that one. So I think I'll start with a definition of a support group. And I think a support group is a public group that assists in recovery or addiction issues, or it assists with either mental health or social issues for individuals. And like I said, public, and it should be run on a volunteer basis. And so I'm talking mostly about peer support groups when I'm talking about the word support group. That's the definition for me. Sometimes in a support group, for instance, in public health regions, you will have a professional in running a support group, and they'll be supervised by that clinical staff, that person like a social worker or a counselor or a psychiatrist, or maybe even a public health nurse. So those also could fall under the definition of a support group. What I'm not talking about is group therapy, which is something that I believe is an appropriate paid service, but there's also free group therapy given by public health regions as well. But I'm differentiating from that because what I'm saying is a support group is a place for you in recovery to get connected to other people that could help you. And often those people are peers. So spiritually speaking, there may or may not be a spiritual component to a support group. There's an abundance of support groups out there. And like I said, I'm not affiliated with any of them. I'm just speaking in general as someone who's a pastor with 10 plus years of recovery from addiction. So I can't endorse any particular support group. I think that would be unfair. And I don't know where you are at as you're listening to this. But there are an abundance of support groups out there. And certainly if you did your research on the internet, you would see them. You'd get information. There's spiritual ones that have a spiritual component, and there are secular, non-religious alternatives to those spiritual ones. So my criteria then for a support group is this. What really I think falls under the definition, and these are the important things. Like I said, the only point I made when I was speaking was free or by donation. No really pressure to pay for the services of that support group. So that is a huge part of this. Addiction really can bring people to complete financial ruin. There should be a place that, recovering addicts can go where they wouldn't feel like they had to pay to get fixed or to get help. So that's one point. And you should also be given the freedom to participate. You should be able to go to a support group and say nothing at all for the entirety that you attend a support group. You should never be forced into speaking, and you should be never forced into actually taking any actions. I think that is another thing that provides a definition of a support group. Completely an open door. Means you could walk out of that door, you could come and go as you please. It's a completely public place where where also it's a public place that has a policy in place that protects you. Meaning a policy of complete anonymity, or complete where everything that is said in that group, there should be some sort of agreement of confidentiality. So either, some groups work on anonymity, some groups work with a confidentiality agreement. When you come in there, it's understood. You either sign or you speak an oath, or it's spoken by the facilitator that this is a confidential space. So freedom and confidentiality. And there should not be a massive time requirement that the support group asks of you. And by that, I mean they should not be saying that this session will be 3 hours long, or this session you're required to be with us for 6 hours, or something like that. I think any support group could meet within the framework of an hour and 15 minutes. I really believe that as well. I don't think that it needs to be a complete time hog, right? That's what's worked for me in terms of support groups. They should not require you to buy materials. So if they have literature, it should either be free, and there should be no obligation to purchase that literature, or there should be people within there that are willing to donate literature to you. There are some support groups that say, we have an entire program, and it just never stops. So then hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases, those wouldn't be support groups. Those would fall into the realm of some other things, and I think we'll cover those in a later video. So no requirement to buy material, and it should be run completely on a volunteer basis. That's another part. I think it's very key. A peer support group really should be run on a volunteer basis, but sometimes there are, professionals called peer support workers that gather groups together as well. And I have worked with those as an addictions counselor, that I would, people who were in the treatment center that living in a treatment center I was working at would go off into support groups that were run by their peer support workers. And they were people that were, that were government employees, and off they would go. So I still think that's another thing that's okay. And you should never feel like you have to pay for any retreats. You should never have to pay for a conference or a webinar. You should never have to pay for next level access to a support group. If someone's asking you to do that, that's a huge red flag. That's not a support group. Like, again, it comes down to that basic definition. And what I want to say in closing is the goal of a support group should be to provide a network of peers to assist you in the issue that you have sought help for. A psychological diagnosis, an addiction issue, an emotional issue, anything in that realm. And there's even people who are in recovery for particular physical ailments as well that require support groups. And you should never be dishing out dollars, to be hooked in with people who have been through the same thing as you. Bottom line, you might need to donate to, keep the doors open. That's okay. But again, that is a optional donation, you know? So that's my point. I really have to give myself a poor grade for my first answer. So what I'm going to give myself is I'm going to give myself a hairy dust ball, one of those dust balls that you see in the corner of your house. And I have dogs, and when it comes time to sweep or vacuum, you just see a gross, disgusting dust ball of dog hair. So dust and hair and gross. That's how I thought that answer was. Very incomplete. And I'm also going to give myself a deflated beach ball. A very cheap beach ball that you bought at the dollar store. A nice big one that you thought you'd be using all day, and you blew it up and you started passing it back and forth on the beach, only to realize that it had a hole in it already. And you got to use it for about 3.5 minutes before you realized you were going to have to continue blowing it up. And then that little nozzle that you have to blow on has sand on it, and the sand gets in your teeth, and then you're tasting sand, and it's gross. So again, 2 very incomplete answers, or 2 prizes for an incomplete answer. And I did my best to clean it up, but like I said, that's about a 30 percentile. That answer is one of my worst answers I've ever done on this channel. So again, I really thank you for tuning in. I can't thank you enough for engaging in this channel. And what do you think about support groups? Mention something in the comments, and you know, if you have any questions about what I said and you want me to clarify in an upcoming video, I'd be happy to do that as well. So thank you again for tuning in. I'll see you in the next video, and I appreciate your view. Talk to you next time. There's plenty more videos for you to watch linked right here.